All right, this is Stephen Sloan. This is March the 2nd, 2012. I'm with Mr. George H. Wessels. We're at his home in San Antonio. This is an interview for the Texas Holocaust and Genocide Commission's Texas Liberators project. Mr. Wessels, thank you for letting us invade your home this afternoon.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'd like to go back and start, we're of course going to talk about your military career, but I'd like to go back and start a little bit about life in Iowa. If you can tell me just a little bit about your family and your life there.
Well, I was born out on the farm, actually in a little town called Matlock. That was not too far from where Sibley is, but I was born out on the farm. The doctor came as far as he could with his car, and then my father had to go get him with the bobsled because it was. And anyhow, I was 3 years old when they moved to Sibley, and then I grew up on the farm there, and went to the 8th grade there, and then I had a help on the farm because my parents owned 2 farms up there, each 160 acres. So I never did go to high school.
You were at home working.
Right.
Yeah. So what's cultivating corn like?
Well, that's plowing, disking, cultivating corn, everything.
Yeah. It's hard work.
Oh yeah. And then in 44, when I turned 18, I registered for the draft and went to Fort Dodge for a physical, and I asked if I wanted to be in the Navy or the Army. I said the Navy, so I took a Navy physical. So then a couple months later, they called me up. I go to Fort Snelling, and I told them that I'm supposed to be in the Navy. They said, "Sorry, the Navy's full." He said, "You're in the Army." That was it. And then I was at Fort Snelling, I guess, for about a week all told. And then they've discovered that I was only about 3 months, 18 years and 3 months old, so they couldn't put me in the infantry. So they sent me to Camp Stewart, Georgia, for radar and searchlight and anti-aircraft training.
Did you enjoy that training?
Yeah, but we had infantry basic for half the day, and then we had the training for another half the day. But we had finished all of our. I had gone through all of the infantry, the infiltration course twice, and they fired all the weapons and everything. And we were all set to go out in the field for our 2-week bivouac, and then that would have completed our training. But they canceled the training and shipped our whole battery to Camp Robinson, Arkansas, and put us back to the 6th week of infantry basic. So I went through all of the stuff all over again. I went through the infiltration course twice again, fired all the weapons again.
Well, do you think your experience in your radar training kind of planted the seed for you being interested in the Air Force later on?
Well, it helped, because when I took tests to join the Air Force, why, I had a real high percentile. So.
Uh-huh. Well, what do you remember? What are some stories you remember from basic? Either time, the first or the second time.
Well, most of it was the hikes.
Yeah.
And one thing I remember also, I had a toothache and I had a decayed tooth. I went to the dentist at Camp Stewart, Georgia. He said, "That's going to have to come out," he said. So he put a shot in there, and he says, "Go sit out there for about 15 or 20 minutes," he says, "and I'll call you back in." I walked out and sat down, and I hadn't sat down, but not even, I guess, 5 minutes. They called me back in, and he goes, I could hear it crack, you know. He said, "Does that hurt?" I said, "Yes." He says, "That's funny." He says, "It shouldn't." Wow, and he pulled it out. He crammed my mouth full of cotton and stopped the blood and sent me back to the barracks. And then that afternoon I had to go take a 10-mile hike.
I can see why that stands out as a memory.
Oh yeah, I still have that tooth missing over here.
Well, now, had you traveled much out of Iowa?
Not before then.
Yeah, not before then.
No.
Yeah. So this is
I think the furthest I got was Sioux City, Iowa.
So this was really a new experience for you.
Oh yeah, completely.
Yeah.
That's the first time I ever rode on a train. And then, they put us on a troop train from Camp Stewart to Camp Robinson. So then after we finished basic at Camp Robinson, I got a 10-day leave to go home, and then I had to report out to Fort Meade, Maryland. So this was about the first part of January of 45.
Okay.
So I had to leave, and then I went reported out to Fort Meade. And then at Fort Meade, they had us participate in a live fire demonstration for the congressman and stuff like that. They wanted to show them this new proximity fuse they had developed for the artillery, where they could put air bursts over the enemy artillery. So we did a mock assault, did a mock assault wave, and they fired that stuff out ahead of us. And then after that, a couple of days later, I went to New York, and then got on the Queen Elizabeth, and it just took us 6.5 days to go across from the New York Harbor to Glasgow, Scotland. We got off the train, got off the boat, got on a train, went to Southampton on the coast, on the English Channel, got off the train, walked on an LST, went across the channel. There were about 400 of us crammed into the tank deck at the bottom of this LST, and at about 2 or 3 inches of this old greasy water.
So you didn't spend any time in Southampton. You got right on the LST to go across the channel.
Off the train and then the LST. And then we got across the channel, and they didn't want to run all the way up and drop the ramp on the beach, because all they had to do was, they have an anchor in the back of those things. They can drop the anchor and then run on up and then drag themselves back off with the anchor. But they were afraid they wouldn't be able to get back off, so they dumped us in about knee-deep water. This is in
this is in winter.
Right,
Yeah.
in the English Channel there. So we're all got soaked up to about our knees,
So welcome to Europe.
Yeah, welcome to France.
So what was the situation there once you got into France?
We got to France there, then we got on trucks and rode on trucks for ways, and then we got on some of these old 40 and 8 boxcars, and went from there to close to Belgium, and we got off and got back on trucks, and then they drove us on up to 75th Division headquarters.
Which was
or
where?
No, wait a minute, no. We stopped at a replacement depot, first rebel depot in Maastricht, Belgium, and we were there about 2 days, and then we got on trucks and they drove us on up to the 75th Division headquarters.
What were the reports or the conversations about what the situation was that you were getting from?
Well, they were they were right up to the Maas River. They were sitting on the west bank of the Maas River, and the Germans were on the other side. And what had happened, the Germans had opened the spillways on the dams upstream, and then they blew up the mechanisms to close them. And then they caused the road, the Maas River, to flood. So it wound up being about a mile wide instead of just a quarter of a mile. So we just, when we got off the trucks at the 75th Division headquarters, General Porter was a division commander. He welcomed us, and he said, welcome to the 75th Infantry Division. He says, you may have heard about R&R and all that stuff, he says, but forget it. He says, we're going to attack until this is all over. That's exactly what we did. But of course, we didn't get started for about 10 days. We sat there on the west bank of the Maas River. We finally got across, I think, on about the, I guess probably the 1st of March, somewhere in there.
Well, you were under fire, though, across the river? Were they firing across the river?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But when if they could spot a target,
Yeah.
Yeah, we went on patrols there, but we only sent one patrol to try to go across the river, and they wound up about 10 miles downstream, so we didn't do that anymore. We just patrolled the riverbank. And we were on an outpost one at the foot of this. There was a collapsed railroad bridge. It was clapped into and the girders and stuff were still sticking out of the water. And they were afraid that Germans might try to infiltrate across the girders, send patrols across. So we had an outpost there. We were in there one night, and they started trying to come across. And our squad leader, we were actually attached to the British Army, and they had issued us some British grenades. But they didn't tell us that it had a 4-second fuse instead of a 7-second fuse like ours. So
that's a big difference.
So our squad leader, there were I think 6 of us, because that was all I was in the squad at that. There were only 3 people in the squad when I joined it, and then 3 of us joined it. Made it. Our squad was 6. We were still 6 short, but the whole squad was over there, and the squad leader, he took a grenade there and he pulled a pin on it and he counted, 1, 2, 3, about 3, and then he threw it. It got out maybe 100 feet or less, and it blew up. He said, "Holy crap!" He said, "Don't count, just throw the damn things." So that's what we did. We threw about, maybe half a dozen grenades, and the Germans, they took off and went back. But that was hairy.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So y'all were there waiting for an opportunity to break through across.
For the river to go down,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Finally we got across the Maas River, and I don't remember too much between it and the Rhine. I know we were moving all the time, and so it only took us about, I guess, 10 days from the Maas River to get up to the Rhine River, because it was my birthday on the 10th, and we dug in on top of the dike, my assistant BAR man and myself. It was just an outpost up on top of the dike there. We just manned it during the night.
Oh, okay.
Because otherwise they could observe it, they could see you. But the rest of the time there, we were back behind the dike in a farmhouse.
Oh, I see.
And my assistant BAR man, he was Polish from in Connecticut. He decided, we found some potatoes down in the basement. He decided he was going to make some potato pancakes. So we lit a fire in a stove, and I guess the wood he used wasn't dry enough. Evidently, they spotted smoke coming out of this chimney. The next thing we do was we had a lookout up in the second floor out the window. All of a sudden he yells, "ME 109!" Everybody, he jumped out the window and sprained his ankle, and the rest of us, we dove down the basement. And he came along, and he took all the windows out and most of the shingles and stuff, like those slate shingles off the roof, but nobody got hurt. And then he went on around, and then our anti-aircraft stuff behind us, they opened up on him, and then all of a sudden his engine conked out, and he went back out across the river and just dove headfirst into the river back on the other side. Never did see the pilot get out, so I don't know if he survived or what. He may have waited until dark before, because he was, real plain sight.
Yeah.
But then after that, a couple of days later, we moved to an old warehouse. It was right on the riverbank, and actually in front of the dike, and had some sliding steel doors and a iron beam hoist that went out where they unloaded barges up into the warehouse. And we stayed there about 2 weeks, waiting for Montgomery to get all his artillery and stuff built up.
And you were attached to Montgomery's? You were attached to the British?
Right,
yeah.
Montgomery.
Yeah.
General Montgomery.
Yeah.
And after we crossed the Rhine, we reverted back to General Bradley.
Okay.
But that was not until about a week after we had crossed, because the British had running rights across the bridge that we had built, because they had to support their people also. But anyhow, we were in this warehouse, and this one night, a German patrol tried to come across the river, and they spotted it. And I was sleeping. We were sleeping up on the second floor. There were beds up there, but we had these sliding steel doors. We had them open about, I guess about 18 inches, and then they had my BAR set up back inside, so it was dark inside where they couldn't see it from across the river. But my assistant was on duty, and I was upstairs sleeping. And all of a sudden, all this firing, I jumped up and went down, and old John, my BR man, he was firing, and they also had set up a 30 caliber light machine gun in there, and they were also firing. And then the patrol never did get more than about halfway across, and it went on down the river. But after all the firing was done and everything, and then my assistant, he was always lazy. He would never refill the magazines, because the BAR had a 20-round magazine in it. So I'm sitting there filling up the magazine. It was about my time to come on anyway, so I was sitting there filling up my magazines out of the machine gun belt. And all of a sudden, the machine gun go bow. And what had happened, they hadn't cleared it. They left a round in it, and the barrel was so hot it ignited the thing. It's a good thing I was sitting on the side,
Yeah.
And anyhow, but that was the only time they ever spotted us. They had there was a 57 millimeter anti-tank gun dug in behind the dike, right off to the right of the warehouse. And whenever they spot a target or something, they would fire. That thing went on for a couple of weeks. I still think I have a hearing loss from that. But,
I bet.
Because that thing had a muzzle blast. It did like 4,400 feet per second. They were firing directly across and knocking down church steeples or any tall buildings that could house observers.
Mm-hmm. Well, did we had talked before we got on that your father and grandfather immigrated from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So did you speak German? Do you speak German?
Little, not very much, sir. I couldn't speak English when I first started grammar school, and but then my sisters and brothers, we all went to a little one-room school out there in the country. So I could speak some. They had it on my records that I could speak some German, but
Yeah.
it was a Plattdeutsch, they called it, Low German.
Uh-huh.
Came from up in the northern part of Germany. And a lot of people thought, it was Low German, that it was a lower class. That wasn't what they referred to. They came from the Low Country.
Yes. Well, the other thing that came up I wanted to ask about was, what did you think of the Brits? Kind of interaction with the British.
Well, I don't know. From what there was a radio communication outfit not too far from where we were in on the Maas River, and seemed like they were only drinking tea. They issued us those grenades. They also issued us some rations, and I got the GIs from that. And then we got to reading on the cases where they were in, and they were packed in 1925. So I didn't think too much of the British.
I would think, yeah. That soured your opinion of them, I'm sure. So when did you finally get to break out from this position where you're in the warehouse there near the Rhine?
We were, when we crossed the Rhine, it was the same situation again. I was upstairs sleeping, and my assistant was down there, down below. And then all of a sudden, this huge artillery barrage started. I mean, it just, everything was shaking, and dust was falling, and I got up and I went down, and my BAR man, he had the BAR, and he was standing back, and there was some bird colonel had set up I guess he was a regimental commander from the 79th Division. 79th Division, they made the crossing, they came through us. And and that artillery barrage, it just went on and on and on, and it was terrific. And I guess the 75th, they moved out and went across, and after about an hour or two later, German prisoners were coming back across, and we helped guard the prisoners. Had them in a bunch there, just bunched them up. Mm. And they were all completely out of it. They were dazed, they couldn't do anything. You try to talk to them or something like that, they just kind of look at you, and their eyes would roll, and yeah. They were they really caught it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Were you able to use your German to communicate with them at all?
A little bit, yeah.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. But not very much, because I'd forgotten a lot of it. And we never spoke it at home anymore. Well, my parents still spoke it to each other, but not to us kids. And anyhow, we had to set up defense perimeters around the bridge, so that combat engineers to build a pontoon bridge just below from where we had been. So then we moved down there and spent about 3 or 4 days doing that. And it put me out, me and some other BAR men and also riflemen out on the barges to fire at anything that came floating down the river. They were afraid the Germans might try to float mines down the river. So we were doing that and firing at all these little bunches of twigs or anything else that came.
Mm-hmm.
And some of our slugs, I guess, must have hit anchor cables or something, because the engineers, they had to stop. They said, don't do it anymore. And so they put a barge about 100 yards upstream from the bridge, and then they ran us out there in a little outboard dinghy thing. We'd get out there for about 2 hours, or until our ammunition ran out.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever hit any mines or see?
No, I must have burned up, I don't know, probably 2,000 rounds.
Shooting at twigs.
Yeah, shooting anything, all kind of debris come floating down.
Yeah.
And actually we got strafed. I had just gotten back to shore when one of these German jets came over and strafed the bridge, but he must have been a rookie pilot or something, because by the time he started firing, he was too fast and too far, and heck, his slugs and stuff hit the river about a quarter of a mile downstream. But the poor guy that had relieved me, he jumped out of the raft and in the water and hung onto the raft. He had to crawl back up soaking wet. He still had to put his 2 hours in out there.
Yeah, talk about the cold. I know it was cold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, our mostly what bothered me the most was when we dug a foxhole there. The ground was still, it wasn't frozen anymore, but it was real cold, ice cold. It would come right up through, and all I had to sleep on was just a poncho. Because whenever we dug in, we would always, after we had crossed the Rhine, when we would dig in, we would always cover our foxhole with some tree branches and logs and stuff like that. Then shovel the dirt we had dug out the hole back on top, because they'd fire artillery rounds into the treetops, and then you get tree bursts, and the stuff would come right straight down on you.
Mm.
So we usually always tried to put a roof over our foxhole, if we had time, that is.
Yeah.
And there was one day, I think, remember I don't remember what day it was, but we were moving pretty fast, and we'd stopped, and every time we'd stop, we'd always dig in, because you'd expect a counterattack, Well, we did one day there, I think we dug 4 foxholes, and nothing ever happened, no counterattack, no anything. And we'd move on.
Mm-hmm. Well, now once you left that position on the Rhine, you moved fairly quickly forward, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we started out on the 31st of March, and the division finally got the clearance to start using the bridge, and but we started our first attack on the 31st of March, then across the river. And that was the same day when we ran into those slave labor camps, and that other battalion took that synthetic rubber plant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you could take me through that, I'd like to hear how you came upon it and what you noticed. And
well, we were actually advancing up this road in column, actually, and with your 15 5-yard interval between you, and we were just moving on up, and then these billings off off to the side there, kind of like a stockade, you know. And but evidently the Germans had taken off, and then the prisoners inside there had broken down. I guess they broke down the gate or whatever, you know. And they were already coming out, and they were all over the place. Mm-hmm. But as we went by, we couldn't stop there. Our squad leader said, "Don't stop, don't mingle, don't stop." So we kept going, and well, a couple of them grabbed my hand, kissed my hand, and then after that I stuck my hand up under my BAR sling so they couldn't get a hold of it, because they were all covered with scabies. We thought they were scabies, but I guess what they were sores from malnutrition. Mm. But they looked horrible, and they were emaciated, skinny. I had never seen, you know, all the time. I came from Iowa. I had never seen anybody that thin. Mm. And we saw a few yellow stars, you know, for the Jews on them, but there weren't very many. And we didn't even know what, actually at that time, what it meant. We thought they were like trustees or something like that. Mm-hmm. For the prison camp. Mm-hmm. And we didn't even know they were just political prisoners and stuff like that, because we thought that we'd probably let loose a whole bunch of crooks and stuff.
Because had you heard of any of these camps, or
not before then?
Not before then.
We didn't even know it when we went along there, and that you know, it was a slave labor camp. We didn't know. They told us later on, about 3 to 4 days later. They said, "Oh, that was a slave labor camp there we went." But then the rear echelon, they came along, they took care of all that stuff. Mm-hmm. They even interviewed, according to the book, they even interviewed one guy. That was and he had actually volunteered to work for the Germans, because they were going to send his paycheck to his family. That's according to the book now. That's we didn't talk to him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they were obviously happy.
Oh, they were very happy, yeah. There were big smiles on their faces.
Yeah. So they came out to kind of greet y'all as you were going by? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how much time did you spend in that area?
Well, I don't know. We weren't, we kept moving, and we reached our objective with just the edge of the forest there that afternoon. So we were digging in, I guess, about 4 or 5 o'clock, something like that in the evening. I know it wasn't quite dark yet. We were digging in, and this is when I guess the Germans saw us and we saw him, but at the same time. We didn't see him until he had fired this 8-round Nebelwerfer thing off the top of the tank. And we were so close to him there, they went right over the top of us, and then they way back behind us. So I guess maybe battalion headquarters or regimental headquarters probably caught more of it than anybody, but I don't know if they hit anything or not. I think the Germans were just as startled as we were. Mm-hmm. First thing we got was the noise, and as soon as we hit the noise, we hit down into the hole. And then after the screeching was gone there, we got up and looked out, and here goes this German tank. He's running like a rabbit, going, taking off. So the next morning we jumped off again, and they always had an artillery preparation before we jump off, about 5 minutes. And we hated that because we would rather catch them sleeping. all the artillery did was wake them up. And and we would, attack, and most of the time, I mean, they kept running there. It just didn't give them time to reorganize or anything
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you were quickly advancing then, I
Right.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah, we were doing like, heck, from 10 to 20 miles a day.
Well,
See, at that time, it wasn't a Ruhr pocket yet there. That didn't happen until about a week after, I think around the 7th or 8th of April, somewhere in there.
mhm.
They finally closed it. That was armored infantry.
Mhm.
And then we had been more or less kind of attacking straight east, and then we turned and started going south to clear out the pocket.
Mhm.
But that kept up for days and days. There we'd get these little small towns, and usually there'd be white sheets hanging out all over the place, and we could just go on through, no big problem. And, until we got to this one town, I think it was Castro Roxel or something like that. We cleared the town, we started up this long slope toward the next town. The towns in that rear pocket there were all like about maybe 3 or 4 miles apart, little villages.
Mhm.
And our squad was up on point. We usually have 2 people clear out on the right side and the left side, and then the point, and then the rest are strung out behind you at 15 feet or 5-yard intervals. And we had just started moving out of the town, and boy, all of a sudden all hell broke loose like a Chinese New Year. In the movies they show these bullets going zing zing. They don't zing. They pop, they crack just as like a rifle shot when they go past you. We found that out when I went through the infiltration course there in training. But boy, we hit the dirt. And fortunately, the road, it was a very old road evidently. It had all through the years, I guess, it had cut down so that it was cut down about that deep. So we crawled back on our stomachs back into the edge of town. And we got back to the edge of town. We jumped up and ran in a house. And but anyhow, while I was laying out there trying to make up my mind whether to move or stay there until it got dark or what, all of a sudden I had this urge to eat the candy that I had in if I was going to get hit, I was going to get hit with a sweet taste in my mouth.
You didn't want to waste that candy, yeah.
Anyhow, I laid there and I ate the candy, and every now and then it'd pop over me. Finally, I went there and said, well, this isn't going to work. So I crawled my stomach back up and jumped up and ran over into the house. And so there were about three more of our squad were in the house there, and some of the others were still further back. But so we were in the house, and I guess it was about 2 hours later or something. My assistant BAR man, he was one of the outside scouts that were, and he and another guy, and they got pinned down further up than we did, up the hill. So John, he's firing what he thought were the machine gun nets. I don't know if he knew where they were or not, but the other one with him, he took off and like a scared rabbit and made it back to the edge of town. then John, he laid there, and all of a sudden he took off and did the same thing. And he made it back, but he had 2 bullet holes through his pant leg, and his buckle on his combat infantry boot was shot off. So he got back into the house, and then we had to wrap him up in a blanket because he started going into shock just from the, you know.
Yeah.
But after a while, he was okay. And then later in the afternoon, that the lookout we had up in the 2nd floor of the building, he called down to the squad leader and he said, "Hey," he says, "Jerry's are doing something over there." He says, "There's, see some telephone poles that are waving around." So the squad leader goes up there and he says, "You idiot, he says, those aren't telephone poles." He says, "Those are 88s on tanks." I guess they were gathering to do a counterattack on us there in the town, and so they called in right away for air support and artillery. And I guess it wasn't, I guess maybe like 10 minutes later, there about 3 P-47s came in. They bombed the tanks. They took out all the tanks. And then they made a big circle and came around and strafed the infantry and broke up the whole thing, I guess. Because we didn't fire a shot. We just watched it out the window there and like sitting there watching a movie. And then we dug in just on the edge of town there for the rest of the night. And I was standing on the side of the building, not in front of the building, on the side of the building, because I thought, you know, over our other flank was our troops. And my assistant, he was about 30 feet out in front of the building there, and he was digging a foxhole there. And all of a sudden, pow! There's a bullet hit the wall about 18 inches or maybe 15 inches beside my head. And I dropped like I'd been shot, scooted around the corner and got back in the building. And John, he stayed on his stomach and crawled back in the building. And it was a sniper had taken a shot at us. But I had a little peppered with the concrete and mortar chips and stuff there in my face. But it just brushed them out and there's no problem. But next morning we moved out and actually in an assault wave instead of a column. And what they had done early in the morning, they sent the mayor, the burgomaster of the town, they sent him up to the next town with a white flag and told him to tell the burgomaster over there that if we get so much as one shot from the town, we're going to call the 47s in, P-47s in, and level the whole town. So we just walked in.
No resistance.
No resistance. Yeah. They were going. So we did that with several. That worked some good. We did that through a lot of little towns. The big cities were the ones that, I think it was Dortmund or something, when we, the outskirts of Dortmund, we ran into resistance. But we've gone through this rail yard, and there was we found 3 of these V2 rockets on 3 flatbed rail cars, and they were just sitting there. They couldn't move out because the rails were all tore up. The whole railroad yard was tore up from our fighter bombers and blowing everything up. But we didn't even get a chance there after we stopped it. We didn't even get a chance to go back and look at them. The OSS came right in behind us and sealed off the area. But that was the first time we'd ever seen one like that.
Yeah.
We'd seen the buzz bombs go over, but
Not the V2s, yeah.
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was a V2. The buzz bombs were a V1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we could see those every night from a foxhole they'd be going over,
Mm.
especially there in Holland, when we were still in Holland.
Mm-hmm.
And when we gone from the Moss River to the Rhine River, we'd dig in. There one time, a whole bunch of strings of toilet paper came floating down from our bomber stream going over. The guys up the air crews had written on there said, "Go on home, boys, it's all over." That was funny.
Well, as you said, you just kept pressing and pressing and pressing.
Right.
No R&R,
No, nothing.
no baths.
No baths.
Yeah. No, just kept pressing forward.
No baths. I didn't have much of a beard or anything there. I was trying to grow I have a picture of myself there right after we moved out of Germany after VE Day.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to grow a mustache, and it was so light there I had to use black shoe polish. So it made me look a little older.
There's nothing wrong with that.
But that kept up, and then toward the last couple of weeks in April, and actually it was our last day on the line when 95th Division came up and relieved us, but we'd gone through this one little village, and there was just going past a farmhouse on the outskirts, and all of a sudden there we had a couple of mortar rounds come in, and I thought, oh, so everybody ran for cover or hit the dirt, and I was close to the farmhouse, so I ran for the farmhouse and got right up by the door, and another one hit. It must have been a concussion round or something, because it just felt like somebody had come up behind me and just gave me a real hard shove like that. And I hit the door, and broke the latch, and it went through the door. But I wasn't hurt, no shrapnel or anything. I had a couple of bruises. I always carried 2 grenades in my field jacket buttonholes. The pocket flap had a buttonhole in it. I always carried 2 grenades in it. But I had 2 bruised breasts there.
Where you fell?
No, where I hit the door.
Yeah. Oh, we hit the door.
But and then that was all they fired at us. And I guess it was about maybe 3 or 4 rounds. They probably didn't have any more ammunition, maybe, or something. But we moved on a little further then, and then we stopped and started digging in for the night. And I guess our artillery must have caught this one German officer. He was riding a horse, and we went just past him a little bit, and then we started digging in, and I went back to see whether or not he still had a Luger, but somebody had already beaten me to it. But in the horse or that officer, neither one of them didn't have any blood or any sign of any kind of wound or anything on them. They must have just gotten killed by the concussion or something, I guess. And so we dug in for the night, and I guess about, I don't know, like 8 or 9 o'clock at night, it was dark. Squad leader came along to all the foxholes, and he said, "Get your gear on, we're moving out." And I thought, oh hell, here we go, another night attack. We had done just one other one, and they had fired this white phosphorus artillery rounds, and that was eerie. That was like something you see in a movie there. these little spirals of smoke coming out of the ground where the white phosphorus was still burning. And here we're attacking.
Through it, yeah.
Yeah. And but that was eerie. But this was the same feeling we had. Oh heck, there's another night attack. And we cussed and like usual. And then squad leader says, "No," he said, "We're moving out. We're being relieved. 95th Division's coming up to take over." Oh boy, talk about happy.
So where'd you go once you were relieved?
We started moving back to the rear, walking. And once we got out of artillery range, well, then we just formed up in a regular formation. We kept spread out before, And then I guess we must have, walked, we marched for several hours. Because I think it was after midnight already before we stopped. And I guess it was probably regimental headquarters we got back to or something. Or maybe division, I don't remember. But anyhow, they said, "Oh, they're going to have a movie for us." So we all get over there and we crowd into this building. And then this colonel, he comes in, he says, "No," he says, "we can't have movies." He says, "We're still in artillery range and we might go to and get hit by artillery." No movie. So the next day, then we got on trucks and we went to this little town of Burleyburg. We started doing occupation duty.
Mm.
And I was, we went out and patrolled a couple times up into this was in a kind of a forest area. And somebody had said they heard gunfire, but we went out on patrols up in the hills there and we never did find anything.
Mm-hmm.
And
all that area was pretty well secure.
Yeah.
At that time.
Mm-hmm. So then we went. Our company moved from Burleyburg to another little town called Dieter-Marsburg, and there was a what they call it, a marine hospital, but it is actually a psychiatric ward for the wounded and all the ones that had went berserk from combat fatigue and stuff. Mm-hmm. They had German veterans from North Africa in there, from Italy and from Germany itself. And that was good duty there. I was sitting at the entrance there, and there was a table. And there's this German girl sitting on one side of the table. I'm sitting on the other side of the table. My BAR and hand grenades hanging in my belt and all that stuff. Looking real fierce. And we weren't supposed to talk to them or anything like that. This non-fraternization thing going on. But she could actually speak fairly good English, and the little German I knew, so we got along pretty good on that, because we could speak as long as it was just had to do with the hospital. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty good duty there. I just sat there and enjoyed that. Mm-hmm. She was a nice young gal, about the same age I was, I guess, probably 19 or 20. Mm-hmm. And she was the daughter of one of the civilian doctors there.
So what was her opinion of Americans?
I don't know. She didn't seem to hate us or anything. Yeah. She said, maybe you can help me with my English. So that's what we did a lot of times. Just sitting there.
So were you there on VE Day? Were you at that post on VE Day?
Yeah. Then on VE Day, our platoon leader, Lieutenant Anders, he was a tech sergeant when I joined the platoon, and he got a battlefield commission for what he had done during the Bulge. He had led a charge up this hill and captured a hill and stuff, and had got his earlobe shot off. But so they promoted him with a battlefield commission to a second lieutenant. But anyway, he called us out in formation, and this was toward evening, about 5 o'clock. We were getting ready to go to chow, and he said, "Well, boys," he says, "it's all over. Today is VE Day." So then he was already getting a liquor ration. So he split his liquor ration with the whole platoon there. Everybody held out their canteen cup and they put about maybe a jigger in it. So we all toasted VE Day. I still do that now. Every VE Day I have a glass of wine and I toast the first platoon.
That's great.
But and that was about it. Then I think about the 22nd of May, we left Germany already and went to France. We were supposed to redeploy through the States to the Pacific. And we got to France, and they had all these camps set up, but they didn't have any service people to run them. So our division was one of the first ones there, so here we are. We get the job of running these, what they call assembly area command camps. So anyhow, the first sergeant, he had us out here in formation, old Sergeant Johnson, he said, "Well, all you guys that earned a combat infantry badge," he says, "and a couple of battle stars," he says, "are now PFCs." So we were all promoted to PFCs. So I wound up with a couple other guys in it was just Camp Brooklyn. They called it Camp Brooklyn. They named it all after city, or U.S. cities. There, Camp Brooklyn, Camp Boston, Camp New York, and stuff like that. And we were at Camp Brooklyn. It was right near Suippes, France, Suippes or something like that. And the Army had set up a ration warehouse, and this was where the mess sergeant could come and pick up their rations. It was a ration breakdown. Mm-hmm. And because I could speak a little German, they had a young German officer there. Actually, he was a veterinarian. Was in the horse-drawn artillery. The Germans still had horse-drawn artillery. And he could speak some English and I could speak some German, so we could converse pretty good. And he had about 10 enlisted German PW. And I would call off to him what we wanted. The supply sergeant would drive up with his truck and it had his requisition sheet, and I would call off to this German officer, and he would tell his PWs what to put in the truck. But this went on we were still doing that when the Japanese surrendered in
August. Yeah.
In August, and I think it was up until about sometime in October, and then the whole division picked up and left. They had enough troops in there, service troops and stuff. And we went back to Germany, to Munich, and we were there, and then they deactivated the division there in Munich, I think it was. And then all of the high point guys, they had these, you got a point, different points for, it was like 5 points for each battle star and 5 points for each medal, and then you got 1 point for each stateside service and 2 points for each overseas service. But then all the high point ones, they were the original 75th veterans. They went on back to the States in December and January. And then the deactivated division, they transferred. I went to an ordnance maintenance outfit in Nuremberg, from Munich to Nuremberg.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in that, was in the shop there for a while as a parts clerk. They started training me as a parts clerk. And then, I don't know, for some reason or other, they needed somebody in their 3rd Army motor pool. So here I get sent over to the 3rd. I was still in the same organization. Went over to the 3rd Army motor pool. We got there, and the motor pool officer was some young Army Air Corps first lieutenant. Yeah, we had Jeeps and these little weasels and all of that stuff. And it was starting of winter again. Mm-hmm. And this was like December of '45. And we started getting these little weasels that would come in a big old wooden crate there. We'd uncrate them there, and we'd service them up, and then we'd hang a test drive sign on the, because we didn't have a trip ticket, to be running up and down the street in Nuremberg. And we'd go take a joyride in, went along in front of the Palace of Justice. This 3rd Army motor pool was only about a mile up the street from this Palace of Justice, where they were going to have the war crimes trials. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I was in there about, I guess about 2 months. And then they transferred all 3 of us. Oh, anyhow, this young first lieutenant in the motor pool, we didn't have any GI driver's licenses, so he got out a bunch of blanks, and he just signed us off for everything. we could drive everything from a Sherman tank to a semi to whatever. And I was driving a 2.5 ton 6x for a while, and I drove a semi gas truck there for a while, stuff like that. And almost rolled that thing over one time there. Whenever the trials were in progress in the Palace of Justice, they called it, they'd have a tank sitting at each corner. Then they had machine guns and stuff up on the roof and all of that, and then they detoured you around it. So I had gone over to pick up a load of gasoline for the motor pool over at the gasoline dump, and I was coming back, and boy, that detour, it was just almost 90-degree turns, and I almost rolled that thing over into a canal there. Mm. Tires screeching, brakes screeching, and I was praying that the thing was going to turn, and it did. But that was the only hairy moment, actually, from the motor pool experience. Oh yeah, one time we were they had us take a bunch of half tracks out to this disposal area, and I was driving one, and I knocked the corner of a house out when I went around a corner with it, but I didn't even stop. I just kept going. But we were out there, and then they had us taking all the ammunition out of the tanks. They had a whole bunch of tanks and armored cars and half track and all that stuff parked out there. They had a bunch of us out there taking the ammunition out. And some of them guys, they were just picking that stuff up and just throwing it out. You know. It's a wonder we didn't blow ourselves up. Yeah. But anyhow, then I got transferred to this place outside of Nuremberg. It was in the quarters for the engineers that had built the Nuremberg Stadium, the huge stadium that Hitler used for all of his grand meetings and stuff. Had the big swastika on top of it. They blew that off, so that was gone when we moved out there. But we could still see the stadium from our quarters there.
Mm.
And then I was there. I was driving a truck, and the CO, commanding officer, was a lieutenant. He was the first Lieutenant Greenlee or something like that. His name was Greenlee or Greenfield or something. I don't remember exactly, but he got about 4 of us ex-combat infantrymen and made us like into a SWAT team. So he issued us all an M4 grease gun, a 45 caliber submachine gun.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a grease gun, but and he put me in charge of that thing. And then one day I was sitting there in the dispatch hut. We had a stove in there with a chimney and all that stuff. And we were just sitting in there chewing the fat. All of a sudden, pow, there comes this 45 slug right through hit the stovepipe and knocked the stovepipe off and went out. And one of my troops there checked out his M3 and he went rabbit hunting with it. And he was on the other side of those railroad tracks that ran along there. And he followed a rabbit up there with that 45 slug. He fired up over the top of the railroad embankment. That slug went right through our... It was up high up above us, but still, you know. Anyhow, so Lieutenant Greenlee, he disbanded the SWAT. He said, "We'll take a chance with the werewolves." That was the only thing they were afraid of. That there might be some underground resistance, but it never did develop. Mm-hmm. And then about a month or two later, and Lieutenant, he sent me to automotive parts clerk school. And I went from Nuremberg over to Heidenheim, Germany. And I went through the automotive parts clerk school and graduated and stuff. And then I was waiting to, he said he'd send a Jeep to pick me up. So I'm sitting there in the barracks there waiting, or our quarters there, waiting for this Jeep driver to show up. And this first sergeant that was in charge of the place there, he comes in and he said, "What are you still doing here?" He says, "You were supposed to have cleared the building by 1 o'clock. I said, "I'm waiting for a Jeep driver. A Jeep's coming to pick me up." He says, "No," he says, "you're out of here." He says, "It's already 1:15. He says, "You're out of here right now." So he had 2 guys, and he said, "Escort this man over to the railroad station and put him on the train." They escorted me, put me on the train, and shoved the orders in my hand. And I looked to see where the heck I was going there, and I asked the conductor, I said, "Where are we going?" He said, to Augsburg or someplace like that, from Heidenheim. So I get to this, I think that was the name of it, I don't even remember, but anyhow, I got off the train there, and fortunately, they had a Red Cross club not far from the railroad station. Mm. And I went in there and checked in at the Red Cross club. And then they got me a ride on the train going from there up to Nuremberg. So instead of getting back on Friday afternoon like I was supposed to, I didn't get back till Sunday afternoon. And the lieutenant said, "Where the heck you been?" I told him what had happened. he sat there and he looked at me and he started laughing. He said, yeah, he says, our Jeep got there about a half hour after you were gone. And then after that, it was only about a month later, then he got orders to go back to the States and I got orders at the same time. And, but he asked me, he says, you got a choice. He says, you can go back to the States right now, he says, or you can take I think it was like a 15-day leave to go to Rome, Italy, and all that stuff on a tour thing. And he said, yeah, or you can go back to the States with me. I'm going back to the States. So we we had a Jeep. So I sat in the back seat with our duffel bags, and we drove from Nuremberg to Frankfurt. Then we caught the train at Frankfurt and went from there to Le Havre, France. And we weren't at Le Havre very long. We processed out and got on an old Liberty ship. It was Sea Devil. I have pictures of it. I don't know if you want to see them or anything, but it took us, I think, 10 full days to come across from Le Havre to New York. And I wound up with a bunk all the way up forward in a forward hold, right where the prow slopes down like that. My bunk was right up against there. Every time that thing would hit a wave, it'd go boom. That went on for 10 days. Boom. And then the little rough weather there, all of a sudden the screws would come out of the water and the whole ship would just shake.
Okay.
But that was I spent most of the time up on deck, and I didn't even go to my bunk there. I slept up on deck. And then we got back to New York, got off the ship, and Red Cross girls were all waiting there for us with milk and cookies and donuts. And I asked for a shot of scotch instead, and they said, no, we don't have that. But that was, things moved fast then. We got off the ship and got on the train, went to, I think it was Camp Shanks or something like that it was called, New York. Got off the train there and went right into the mess hall, and they had a huge steak dinner for us. And this was like 10 o'clock at night already.
I know you were anxious to get home.
Oh yeah, and then the next day we processed out here. We went from there to the movie theater, and they separated us all into different areas of the country where we were going to be discharged. So I went to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, by Chicago. That was about the nearest separation place for me, for Northwest Iowa. So I was only about, I was there about 2 days processing, and then I was discharged. Ran out the gate to catch the interurban from Fort Sheridan to the railroad station in Chicago. And he was just starting to move, and I threw my duffel bag in the railroad track in front of it. He had to stop. I picked it up, and he opened the door and got up, and he just gave me a little dirty look, and that was it. He didn't say anything. So I got on. I got to the railroad station. It's a good thing I caught him, because the train that I was supposed to take to go to Iowa was, I think I only had about a half hour to catch it. So I had about $300 or $400 of cash in my pocket. Then they gave us $100 mustering out pay and cash, but also our whatever pay we had coming. So I got on the train, and I forget, I think it was in Liberty, Iowa. I think that's Hoover's hometown.
Mm-hmm.
We stopped there for about an hour or something like that, and I got off the train, and it was just a coach. And I got off the train and went in the restaurant there. There was a restaurant there at the station. Got something to eat. And the waitress there, she looked at me and she said, "Boy," she said, "you're so cute, I'm going to take you home with me." I said, "Oh, no, you're not." And then got back on the train, and then I was sitting there to some guy sitting by me, and he says, "You know," he said, "if the war had lasted 6 months longer," he says, "my dad would have really made a killing in selling uniforms." And I looked at him and I said, "You better get out of the car here," I told him, "because if you don't get out of this car, I'm going to throw you off the damn train." He froze. The conductor came along. He says, "What's going on?" I told him, I said, "You get that SOB off my car here." I said, "Or I'm going to throw him off the damn train." I told him what he had said.
Yeah.
So that conductor, he said, "Okay, well, mister," he says, "come on," and put him in another car. But after that, then everything was uneventful. I got back to Sibley, and that was in the afternoons. And with nobody there at the station, they didn't. So the station keeper there, he let me use the phone, so I called my folks there. They lived out on the farm yet. So my sister-in-law, she came in and picked me up, and she was staying with my parents at that time, my brother and her. But
Yeah, I know you were excited to get home.
and boy, I got home, and everything seemed so small. It seemed like all the rooms were real small, and the whole house seemed like it was real small. Then I walked in the door, and my dad and my mother, they just looked at me like I was a ghost or something. Finally, they unfroze. And that was, and the first thing my mother, she had to go and feed me. She had that old German syndrome, you know. Always got to feed them.
Well, now, so I know later you're going to have a career in the Air Force.
Right.
But I guess for a time there you were helping out your folks on the farm?
Yeah, I did that until they moved to town, and then my two brothers took over the two farms. I still helped off and on some, but then I started working with my brother-in-law. He had a farm of his own at that time. He was married to one of my older sisters, because I had 4 older sisters and 3 older brothers. And so I did work with him, and also did some carpenter work with him. And that went on for about 4 years. And then finally, I got tired of it, because I wasn't going anywhere, you know. And I was running my brother-in-law's corn picker and his combine and stuff, doing custom work for the other farmers around there. I got $1 an acre for each acre. So I made pretty good money that way, because I could run through about 30 acres a day, sometimes 40, depending. So I was making about $30, $40 a day. That was, you know, minimum wage was like $1.25. But I got tired of that, and told my dad and mother, I said, I'm going to go enlist in the Air Force. But I'm tired of this. My dad said, well, I said, what do you want to do that for? He says, I'll go there and help you out if you want to start farming. I said, I don't want to be no farmer. I don't want anything more to do with a farmer. So, called this Air Force enlistment station in Omaha, Nebraska. That's about 180 miles south of where we would live. And I was asking them a bunch of questions. They said, well, they said, we're going to be making a round trip up there through Worthington, Minnesota, and down through Sibley. He says, we can meet you there. So when they came down, they stopped by, or actually stopped by the house. Just sat there by the table. And actually, I more or less tentatively enlisted right there. Mm-hmm. But then they told me what day to report to Omaha, for the testing and swearing in ceremony and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And so about, I guess about a week or two later, I got called and told to go ahead and report on such day. Caught the train from Sibley and went to Sioux City, and then from Sioux City down to Omaha on the train. Yeah, I took their tests and everything. I made a real high percentile score on the entrance exams and stuff. So they told me, they said, you're going to have to lose one stripe, they said, to join the Air Force. Then there was an Army recruiter who was also in the same station there. And he said, why don't you come back in the Army? He says, we got a slot for you out in the 7th Infantry Division out in California. He said, you can have your old rank back. Because of the corporal when I got out. I said, no thanks, no thanks. So I joined the Air Force, and they sent me to San Antonio, to Lackland Air Force Base as a re-enlistee. And I was there a week or so, and then I was there as an element leader because I was pretty good at giving drill commands. Mm-hmm. And took a bunch of tests, and they sent me to A&E, Aircraft and Engine School up at Shepherd Air Force Base. And I completed that. I was the runner-up to the honor student there. And they sent me to specialized R-4360 aircraft engine school at Chanute Air Force Base, Illinois. Mm-hmm. So when I checked in there, lo and behold, here's the first sergeant sitting there behind the desk, and he's got a combat infantry badge on, and here I walk in with a combat infantry badge on, and his eyes got big and round. And he says, well, I was a PFC, of course the other guys were privates. Mm-hmm. So he says, what I'm going to do, he said, I want to set up an honor barracks here, he said, and I'm going to put you in charge of the honor barracks. So, here I am, I get there, and he said, the only thing he says, you got to go and postpone your class for 30 days. I said, okay, I can do that. And so we got started with this, got it set up, and had this one empty barracks. We repainted the whole inside of the barracks, and where the foot lockers would sit, we made frames for the foot lockers to sit in, and made little square blocks with a round hole in it for the bunk beds to sit in, so they wouldn't be moved. They always stayed dressed up. And it was real sharp looking. And all of the honor students, as long as they kept up their appearances and stuff like that, well, he would judge them, the ones that would come in. And
Mm-hmm.
so then after a month of that, I stayed in the honor barracks, and I started school. And after I finished school there, I was the honor student there. I made the best score in graduation. And from there, they transferred myself and 3 other guys. They put me in while I was there, they made me a corporal. So less than 6 months after I joined the Air Force, I had my old rank back anyhow. So I went to Randolph Air Force Base over here as an engine mechanic on B-29s. And we were there 4 years. And when I re-enlisted, I met the wife here in San Antonio. We got married, and then I re-enlisted in April, and we got married in July, and then in August they sent me to Japan for 18 months. So she stayed here and worked, and I went to Japan for 18 months in the Air Force. 22nd Troop Carrier Command. We flew in and out of Korea. The Korean War had just ended, and we flew a mobilization exercise into an airstrip just below the demilitarized zone. And there was this, it was made of this pure steel plating, the runway was. There wasn't any concrete, it was just all that pure steel plating. And we were flying these big old 4-engine C-124s off of that. And we were only about 8 miles from the demilitarized zone, so they issued us each a .30 caliber carbine and gave us each 1 magazine of ammo. That was weird. Go up there on a maintenance stand and work on an airplane, and it carried your carbine with you all the time.
Well, I know we're running low on time, but I want to ask you about, you were telling me about the Cuban Missile Crisis before we got on, and just, I know you were back in the States. If you could tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, well, we were stationed at Mountain Home Air Force Base, Idaho. We got there in June of '62, and then that missile crisis happened in October. And all of the dependents that lived on the base, all of the wives and the children, they took their children, they went out and camped out up in the mountains when it happened. Mm-hmm. This was on the 22nd of October. Mm-hmm. And I called her brother in Boise, and then he had his wife come down, pick Madeline and the kids up, bring them back to Boise, because I had to stay on the base. And because we had 30 minutes warning. In other words, if the Russians launched a missile at our base, and we were prime target, because we had those nuclear-armed B-47s, and all of those, of course, the missile sites, they were about 30 miles out in the desert. But so Catherine, she came in, picked Madeline and the kids up and took them to Boise. And I stayed out on the flight line. And they brought us cots out there to sleep on, and some blankets, and they brought the chow out to us. So we were all cocked and ready to go.
You said in 15 minutes you could have been airborne?
We could have launched the whole fleet. All of our missiles and all of our bombers, yeah. We had to beat that 30-minute time limit.
Well, I want to go back and just ask you a question about, because one of the reasons why we're here is the experience you had with those that came out of the slave camp there.
Yeah.
If you could talk just again about just the impressions you do you remember your feelings from that period and
Oh yeah, yeah. I was, you know, just completely amazed. I had never seen anybody that thin and skinny. I mean, they looked terrible. You know, their cheeks were always sunken in, and they had sores all over, and still ragged clothes on, and then the squad leader, he said, "Come on, keep moving, don't mingle, keep moving, keep moving."
Yeah.
Well, that's what the squad leader was for.
Yeah. I know it was hard to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wanted to help him.
Because some of the guys, you know, wanted to give them K rations or something like that, and he says, "No, no, no, no. Don't give them anything." He said, "The rear echelon will take care of them."
Mm-hmm.
So that's what, and then the rest is history.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, is there anything else I should ask you about that we didn't get time to? I know you've got a commitment. I don't want to take too much of your time.
No, I can't think of anything else. Okay. Pretty well covered everything. All the ups and downs and the scary moments. The first attack, when we first attacked, that was the scariest actually. Your stomach was knots and sweating it out. And once we got moving, then it felt a lot better. Then the squad leader, he told us, he said, well, he says, if you survive the first 24 hours, he says, you'll probably make it for a week. If you make it for a week, he says, you'll probably survive for the month. And if you make it for a whole month, he says, you might go to last through the end of the war. So there wasn't any limit to the tour or anything. You were on the front, you were on the line until you either got hit or killed, one or the other.
Yeah. So it was day by day.
Right.
Yeah.
So every morning you would jump, except for when we were on the Maas River and when we were on the Rhine River, we had the defensive positions. We got to rest up then and take it easy. Didn't have to dig any holes, we could just sleep. We figured if the Germans would shell that warehouse, if they did spot us, they would probably fire 88s into the first floor. So we slept on the second floor. And we didn't even bother to look up on the third floor of the place there. And I think a couple of days before they crossed the Rhine, we went up and looked, and there was a whole bunch of barrels of wine up there. Yeah. The squad leader, he said, I am not going to let those rear echelon SOBs have any of this. And he took his Thompson sub and shot them all full of holes. Wine ran all over the place.
You could have been enjoying that the whole time you were there.
Well, we did fill our canteen.
Yeah, Well, Mr. Wessels, I want to thank you for your time today, and Robert and I want to thank you for your service.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Haven't told all these war stories in a long time.